Welcome to an unforgettable adventure where the spirit of humanity dares to go further than ever imagined. This channel brings you powerful stories of courage, determination, and the unstoppable will to explore the unknown. If you love stories that spark your imagination and inspire you to dream bigger, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an epic journey. Today we begin a breathtaking tale of humanity's bold journey beyond the end of the known universe, a story filled with hope, mystery, challenges, and triumphs as humanity reaches for the stars and ventures into the great beyond. Every moment will keep you on the edge of your seat as you witness the power of human spirit pushing past every limit. Let us embark on this incredible adventure together. Subscribe now and click the bell icon so you are always a part of these amazing stories. The year was 2587 and Earth had become a gleaming world of harmony and innovation. Humans had conquered disease, hunger, and even death itself to some extent. Cities floated in the sky while oceans were traversed by sleek vessels powered by pure fusion energy. The solar system was now a bustling network of colonies stretching from Mercury to the icy moons of Neptune. Humanity had thrived within its celestial backyard, but for many the stars beyond still whispered promises of greater mysteries. It began with a signal, a faint whisper from the edge of existence captured by one of the deep space listening arrays orbiting Pluto. Scientists at the Polaris Institute could not decipher its origin nor replicate it. The signal was not a cry for help nor a warning, it was something else, something that defied all known physics and understanding. After decades of debate, research, and preparation, the United Earth Assembly approved Project Infinity. Humanity would not be content with the solar system or the Milky Way, they would go beyond. The ship that would carry them was the Elysium, a marvel of engineering 3 kilometers long with engines capable of bending the fabric of space itself. Elysium was designed not to travel through known space but to leap into the true unknown. A crew of 500, the best and brightest across all fields, was selected to embark on this historic voyage. Every member had volunteered knowing that they might never return. Captain Elena Rios was a legend even before she accepted the mission, known for leading the first successful colonization of Ganymede. She was a woman of unbreakable will and boundless vision. Under her command, Elysium would venture where no human had ever dared. She stood before the assembled crew in the grand atrium of the ship, her voice steady as she addressed them. "Today we stand on the edge of all we know," she said, her eyes sweeping across the faces of engineers, scientists, explorers, and dreamers. "Behind us lies a history of triumphs and struggles. Ahead lies a future unwritten. We are the ones who will write it. With courage, with unity, and with hope, we will step into the endless dark and find the light within it." The departure was a moment shared by billions across Earth, and the colony's families gathered in parks and plazas, eyes lifted to the skies as Elysium ignited its engines. A shimmering blue tear appeared in the fabric of space, and the ship surged forward, vanishing into the unknown. Inside the ship, excitement and tension filled the air. Crew members manned their station, systems were triple-checked and protocols reviewed. The first phase of the journey was simple according to plan, a series of micro-jumps through the outer edges of the galaxy, testing the engines and navigation systems before the final leap beyond. Dr. Adrian Malik, head of astrophysics, spent hours in the observation deck studying the shifting colors of hyperspace around him. Young officers whispered in awe at the spectacle, streaks of violet, gold, and crimson painting the void like living art. No human had ever seen anything like it. As Elysium prepared for the final jump, Adrian detected an anomaly, a distortion in the gravitational field ahead unlike anything recorded before. It was not a black hole, not a wormhole, nor anything science could currently explain. Captain Rios called an emergency meeting of senior staff. "The risks were enormous," Rios said, standing before the holographic display showing the anomaly. "It could tear the ship apart, or it could be the doorway we have been searching for." There was silence, then one by one the officers nodded. Adrian smiled grimly. "We came here to go beyond," he said. "We must not falter now." With unanimous agreement, Elysium plunged forward toward the distortion. Engines roared, shields flared against invisible forces, and then for a heart-stopping moment everything went dark. When light returned, the stars were gone, only a vast endless horizon of swirling energy stretched before them. They had left the known universe behind. The journey had truly begun. The crew of the Elysium stared in disbelief at the vast expanse before them. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The stars, once familiar and reassuring, had vanished, replaced by an eerie emptiness that seemed to pulse with energy. The ship drifted in the heart of this vast void, where the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist in unpredictable ways. The crew had crossed into the unknown, but what lay beyond was far more complex and dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Captain Elena Rios stood on the bridge, her hands steady on the command console. She was not one to show fear, but even she could not help but feel the weight of the moment. They were the first to venture into this uncharted space, and the uncertainty was overwhelming. No maps, no guidelines, no previous explorers to learn from. Everything depended on their ability to adapt and survive. Status report, Rio said, her voice calm but firm. Adrian Malik, who had been monitoring the ship's systems, turned from his console. We've lost all communication with the outer systems, he said, his voice tight with concern. The distortion field must have interfered with our signals. We're completely isolated. We need to regain contact with the home base, Rios replied, her brow furrowed. But more than that, we need to understand what this place is. We don't know if it's safe or hostile out here. Prepare for a scan of the surrounding space. Look for any signs of activity. The crew worked swiftly, each one of them aware that their survival depended on their ability to understand this new realm. As the minutes stretched into hours, the sense of isolation grew more profound. There were no ships, no cosmic landmarks, nothing familiar. It was as though they had stepped into a different dimension altogether. Finally, Dr. Malik's voice broke the silence. "Captain, you need to see this," he said urgently. Rios hurried to his side and gazed at the holographic display. Floating before them was a massive, glowing anomaly, something that looked almost like a star, but its energy signatures were completely unlike anything they had ever encountered. It pulsed rhythmically, radiating energy in waves that seemed to distort space itself. The anomaly was stable, but it was growing. "We should investigate," Rio said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Plot a course. But keep your distance. We don't know what we're dealing with here." As the Elysium moved closer, the anomaly's energy grew more intense. The entire ship began to vibrate, and the crew felt the pressure building. The scanners began to malfunction, and the lights flickered. Something was interfering with their systems, but they couldn't identify the source. "Captain, I'm detecting movement within the anomaly," said Lieutenant Sarah Kinley, the ship's chief navigator. "It's not natural. It's like something is pulling at the ship." Rio's heart skipped a beat. "Pulling? How is that possible?" Before Kinley could respond, a low, rumbling sound reverberated through the ship. The anomaly's glow intensified, and suddenly, from within its core, tendrils of energy shot out, wrapping around the Elysium like a giant, cosmic hand. The ship shuddered violently as the tendrils began to drag them toward the center of the glowing mass. "We're being pulled in," Kinley shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "I can't break free. The engines won't respond." The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but the anomaly's grip was too strong. The ship was caught in its pull, and no matter what they did, it was as though the forces around them had a mind of their own. "Brace for impact," Rios commanded, her voice steady even in the face of the unknown. The Elysium lurched violently as it was drawn into the heart of the anomaly. The walls of the ship groaned under the pressure, and alarms blared as systems began to fail one by one. The crew held on, each person bracing for what seemed like certain doom. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the ship was released. The tendrils of energy vanished, and the Elysium was thrown into open space once more, albeit not where they had been before. Rio stumbled to her feet, surveying the scene in disbelief. The stars were still absent, but they were no longer in the same place they had been. The ship had been transported to a new location, one that seemed to stretch out infinitely in all directions. "We're not in the same place anymore," Adrian said, his voice hushed as he processed the data. "The fabric of space has twisted. We've been moved to a different region entirely, one beyond the known universe." "Then what was that?" Rios asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What was that force pulling us in?" "We don't know," Adrian replied, his eyes wide with awe and fear. "But it's clear we are no longer in our own reality. This is something beyond anything we've ever understood." The crew stood in stunned silence, realizing the magnitude of what had just occurred. They had not only crossed into the unknown, they had entered a realm beyond the very laws of physics they had once relied on. They were truly alone now, far from the world they had once known. The question was no longer just how they would survive, it was whether they could even make sense of what they had encountered. Captain Rios stood tall, her resolve hardening in the face of the unknown. We will find a way, she said, her voice unwavering. We didn't come this far to turn back now. Let's move forward. There's something out here, and we need to know what it is. And with that, the crew of the Elysium set their course into the uncharted realms of the universe, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had crossed the boundary of reality itself, and there was no turning back.
The silence of the vast unknown pressed in on the crew of the Elysium. The strange, infinite void before them seemed to stretch on endlessly, yet there was an undeniable sense of something watching, something waiting. The glowing anomaly they had encountered earlier still pulsed faintly in the distance, but there were no answers. The crew's only choice now was to explore further and uncover the secrets of this strange, uncharted realm. Captain Elena Rios stood at the front of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she gazed out at the unfamiliar landscape. The view screen displayed a terrifying yet mesmerizing scene, a swirl of colors and patterns in the distance, constantly shifting, as though the very fabric of space was alive. "Captain," Lieutenant Kinley called, her voice tense. "We're detecting something unusual. It's not on any of our charts, but it's definitely a structure. Massive. Out there, beyond the anomaly." Rios' brow furrowed. "A structure?" she repeated, her mind racing. "What kind of structure? Are you sure?" Kinley nodded, her eyes wide as she scanned the data. "It appears to be artificial, but unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's far too large to be a ship, and its shape doesn't match anything in our database. It's almost as if it was built by a species with an entirely different concept of design." Rios turned to face her senior staff. "Prepare a course. We need to see it for ourselves. Plot the fastest route, but proceed with caution. This could be a trap, or it could be our first real clue as to where we are." The crew set to work immediately, and the Elysium began its slow, cautious approach toward the strange structure. As they neared, the shape became clearer, a massive spire that seemed to stretch impossibly high into the swirling void, its surface etched with patterns that defied any attempt to understand. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen, a monolith in the true sense of the word, rising up like a sentinel in this new, strange world. "Engage the scanners," Rios ordered. "Let's get as much data as we can before we make contact." The scanners buzzed to life, but the results were unsettling. There were no energy readings, no life signs, no detectable materials that matched anything they had encountered before. It was as if the structure existed outside of normal physical laws. "We're not getting any useful information," Captain Adrian Malik said, his tone grim. "It's as if the structure is blocking our scans." "Could it be a weapon?" Lieutenant Kinley asked, her voice laced with concern. "It's possible," Rios replied. "But we won't know until we approach it more closely. Keep an eye on all systems." "I don't trust this." As the Elysium drew closer, the spire's surface began to shimmer, the strange patterns etched into it glowing faintly. For a moment, the crew thought they saw movement, but it was so subtle and quick that it could have been a trick of the light. "Hold steady," Rios commanded. "We need to be prepared for anything. This could be a moment of contact, or it could be a trap. Everyone remain alert." The crew watched in tense silence as the Elysium glided ever closer to the spire. It felt like hours had passed, yet no time at all. The structure loomed larger now, its size impossible to comprehend. It was too large to be part of any ship or station, but it also didn't look like anything they had ever seen in terms of architecture. The surface was smooth and polished, gleaming with an otherworldly sheen, but there was no indication of windows, doors, or any other features that suggested a way in. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot out from the spire, hitting the Elysium's forward shields with a tremendous force. The ship lurched, and alarms blared as the crew scrambled to regain control. "Shields are holding," Adrian said, his voice strained as he worked the control panel. "But the energy readings are off the charts. Whatever this is, it's not conventional. Return fire." Rios shouted, her voice sharp. "Activate weapon systems." But before anyone could react, the beam ceased as abruptly as it had begun. The crew was left in stunned silence, unable to fully comprehend what had just occurred. "Did we do something wrong?" Lieutenant Kinley asked, her voice trembling. "I don't think so," Rios replied, her gaze fixed on the spire. "It's like it was testing us, or trying to communicate." Suddenly, the Elysium's comm system flickered to life, sending a shockwave of surprise through the crew. A strange, melodic sound came through the speakers, indistinct, like voices speaking in an alien tongue. It was rhythmic, almost musical, but incomprehensible. "Are we hearing that too?" Lieutenant Kinley asked, wide-eyed. "Yes," Rios said slowly, her mind working to process the situation. "It's some sort of transmission. Let's see if we can decode it." The crew worked quickly to isolate the signal and analyze its patterns, but the complexity of the transmission was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was as though the sound itself was shifting constantly, evolving in real time. The more they tried to interpret it, the more complex it became, as if it was actively resisting their understanding. "Captain," Adrian said, his voice tense, I think it's trying to communicate with us. But it's not in any language we know. It's not even in a format we can analyze with our current technology." "Then what do we do?" Kinley asked, clearly worried. "We do what we came here to do," Rios replied firmly. "We keep moving forward. We've crossed the threshold into the unknown, and this is part of the journey. We will not turn back now." With renewed determination, the Elysium continued its course toward the mysterious spire. But as they moved closer, the transmission grew louder, more insistent, as though it was calling them, beckoning them forward into the depths of the unknown. For the crew, the mystery deepened, but so did their resolve. They had crossed into a new reality, one that defied all their understanding, and there was no turning back.
The mysterious transmission continued to pulse in the background as the crew of the Elysium slowly closed the distance to the towering spire. It was no longer just a structure, it had become a presence, an enigma that beckoned them, challenged them to understand its origins and purpose. The rhythmic, melodic hum of the transmission grew louder, more persistent, reverberating through the ship's walls as if calling to them from beyond the fabric of space. Captain Elena Rios stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the structure as it loomed ever closer. Her mind raced with the possibilities, trying to piece together what they were encountering. Was it a message? A trap? A test? And what was the significance of the energy pulse they had experienced earlier? It was clear that this spire was unlike anything they had ever encountered, and every instinct told her they were on the brink of something profound. "We're close enough now," Rio said, her voice steady but edged with anticipation. "Plot a course to dock with the spire. Let's see if we can make direct contact." Lieutenant Kinley hesitated before responding. "Captain, are you sure? We still don't fully understand what this thing is. We don't know if it's safe to approach that close." "I'm aware of the risks," Rios replied, her gaze unwavering. "But if this is the opportunity we think it is, we need to take it. We came out here to explore, to push the boundaries of human knowledge. This is the moment we've been waiting for." The bridge fell silent as the crew prepared for what could be the most significant moment of their lives. Systems were checked and rechecked, and the crew moved with practiced precision. But as they approached the spire, a strange energy filled the air. The hum of the transmission seemed to intensify, reverberating throughout the ship, making the crew feel as though they were being drawn into its very heart. It was as though the ship itself was being guided, compelled by some force they couldn't understand. As they neared the structure, the ship's sensors suddenly flickered to life, sending a wave of data through the control systems. But the readings were even more confusing than before. There were no solid materials to analyze, no metals or alloys. It was as though the spire existed outside of normal matter, as though it was made of something far beyond their comprehension. "We've hit a dead zone," Adrian Malik said, his voice filled with frustration. "I can't get a clear read on anything. It's like the structure is disrupting our systems." "We'll have to go in blind," Rio said, her voice resolute. prepare the docking bays. We'll send a team out in suits to investigate. The team suited up, each member feeling the weight of the unknown pressing on their shoulders. They were humanity's first explorers into this strange realm, and they were about to step into a mystery that had been waiting for them, perhaps for eons. As the airlock sealed behind them, the team stepped out of the ship and onto the surface of the spire. The texture beneath their boots was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was smooth, almost liquid in appearance, yet solid to the touch. The material shimmered with an iridescent glow, shifting colors in response to their movements. "Keep your comms open," Rio said, her voice coming through the team's earpieces. "Stay in formation and proceed carefully. We don't know what we're dealing with here." The crew moved cautiously across the surface, their boots making no sound as they walked. The transmission still echoed in their minds, a haunting, beautiful melody that seemed to come from all directions at once. There was no wind, no atmosphere, yet it felt as though something was stirring around them. Then, as they rounded a corner of the spire, something incredible happened. A panel in the side of the structure shimmered to life, revealing a doorway that had not been visible moments before. It was as if the spire itself had recognized their presence and opened to them. "Did anyone see that?" Lieutenant Kinley asked, her voice trembling with awe. "It's opening," Dr. Malik replied, his voice equally filled with wonder. "It's responding to us." Rios motioned for the team to approach. "Stay alert. This could be a test. But we can't ignore this opportunity." The doorway was smooth, with no visible controls, no buttons or handles. Yet it opened seamlessly as they approached, as though it recognized their presence and permitted them entry. The crew stepped inside, and immediately, the atmosphere changed. It was not the same void they had just crossed. The interior of the spire was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a vast, open chamber, its walls lined with shifting patterns of light and color. The air was dense with energy, and the temperature seemed to fluctuate in unpredictable ways. "Is this alive?" Lieutenant Kinley whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It feels like it," Rio said, scanning the room. "But not in any way we would recognize. It's as if the entire structure is conscious, aware of us." As they moved further into the chamber, the walls seemed to pulse with energy. The shifting patterns on the surfaces of the walls formed images that were strangely familiar, yet foreign at the same time. They showed scenes of spacefaring civilizations, vast fleets of ships, and incredible technological feats. But there was something unsettling about the images. They weren't just depictions of the past, they seemed to be alive, moving, changing, as if they were caught in an endless loop of time. Are they memories?" Dr. Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Rios replied. "But they seem to be telling a story. A history of beings that came before us." As they continued to explore, the crew realized that the spire was not just a monument, it was a repository of knowledge, a living, breathing structure that had recorded the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The images they saw were not static, they shifted and changed, revealing new scenes and glimpses of distant worlds, some familiar, some completely alien. "We need to document this," Rio said, her voice filled with awe. "Every detail. This could change everything we know about the universe." But just as they began to take their first samples of the spire's surface, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. The walls of the spire pulsed brighter, and the transmission's hum grew louder, now accompanied by a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from all directions at once. The air became thick with energy, and the crew felt an overwhelming pressure, as though the very fabric of space was being compressed around them. "Something's happening," Lieutenant Kinley said, fear creeping into her voice. "It's like the spire is reacting to us. It's alive." Before anyone could respond, the chamber shook violently, and a blinding light enveloped the crew. The blinding light engulfed the crew, washing over them with such intensity that for a moment, they lost all sense of time and space. It felt as though the very core of the universe had shattered, and the crew of the Elysium was caught in its wake. Their bodies trembled under the force of the energy surge, their minds disoriented by the overwhelming sensation of being pulled into something far beyond their comprehension. Then, as quickly as it had come, the light vanished. The crew was left in a strange stillness, surrounded by the eerie hum of the spire's transmission, which now seemed louder, more insistent than ever. The walls of the chamber pulsed with energy, and the temperature shifted again, becoming unbearably cold. "Report," Captain Rios commanded, struggling to steady herself against the aftereffects of the light. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her chest, and her thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and uncertainty. Lieutenant Kinley was the first to speak, her voice shaky but determined. "Captain, the spire, it's changed. The patterns on the walls, the images, they're different now. It's like it's responding to us in real time." Dr. Malik, who had been standing nearby, glanced at the shifting images with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "It's not just reacting to us," he said slowly. "It's evolving. The history we saw earlier, it's changing. The scenes are more detailed now, as if we're witnessing the continuation of a story that's still unfolding." Rio stepped forward, her boots silent on the smooth surface of the chamber. She looked at the wall, where the images had transformed. The once static depictions of long-dead civilizations were now filled with vibrant, moving scenes, alien species interacting, ships in battle, technological advancements being made. But amidst the beauty of the images, there was something darker creeping in. In some of the scenes, the civilizations were falling, their worlds collapsing into ruin, their ships drifting lifelessly through space. This isn't just history," Rios murmured, her voice filled with a sense of dread. "It's a warning. A record of civilizations that have risen and fallen. And now, we're part of it." The crew stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. It was as if they had stumbled upon the very heart of the universe's greatest secrets. But with that revelation came a terrifying realization: they were not just observers. They were participants in a cosmic cycle, and they had no idea where it would lead. "Captain," Kinley said, her voice barely a whisper. Do you think we're meant to follow in their footsteps?" Rios turned to face her, her expression resolute. "I don't know. But we can't turn back now. We've come this far. If this spire holds the knowledge of civilizations that have existed before us, then it's our responsibility to learn from it. We need to understand what happened to them and why." The crew nodded in agreement, but there was an underlying tension in the air. The weight of their mission, and the unknown dangers that lay ahead, were impossible to ignore. As the crew continued to study the wall, the chamber trembled once again, and the walls around them began to shimmer. The energy surge from earlier seemed to be building, and the crew could feel it. Something was about to happen. "Captain," Dr. Malik said urgently, "the patterns on the walls, they're not just images anymore. They're becoming three-dimensional. It's like the spire is trying to project something into our minds. A vision of sorts." Rio's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, a vision?" Before Malik could answer, the chamber darkened, and a series of sharp, metallic sounds echoed from the walls. The spire itself seemed to be coming to life, its surfaces shifting and rearranging in response to the crew's presence. It was as though the entire structure was scanning them, probing their minds, trying to understand who they were and what they sought. Then, from the depths of the chamber, a new image began to form, this one different from the others. It was not a civilization or a battle, but something far more abstract, a vast, cosmic landscape, filled with swirling nebulas, collapsing stars, and rippling waves of energy. In the center of this chaotic display was a dark, spherical object, radiating a menacing energy. The object seemed to be pulling at everything around it, devouring the very fabric of space itself. The crew gasped as they watched, transfixed by the image. It was as though they were being shown the very birth and death of entire galaxies, the rise and fall of cosmic forces that they could not possibly comprehend. "What is that?" Kinley whispered, her voice trembling. "What is happening to the universe?" Rios took a step forward, her eyes locked on the image. It's something beyond us. That sphere, it's pulling everything toward it. It's consuming everything in its path." Dr. Malik's face was pale as he stared at the vision. "It's a black hole. A supermassive one, much larger than anything we've ever encountered. But it's not just pulling in matter, it's pulling in time itself. Everything in its reach is being consumed, stars, planets, even light. It's devouring the very fabric of existence. The crew was silent for a long moment, processing what they were seeing. The implications of the vision were staggering. They were witnessing the end of everything, the destruction of entire realities, and the collapse of the universe itself. Is this what happened to the other civilizations? Kinley asked, her voice barely audible. Is this how they fell? Rios nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had learned. I think so. But what's worse is that this isn't just a warning. It's happening again. The spire, this structure, has seen it before. And now, it's showing us the same thing. The end of all things. Suddenly, the image of the black hole pulsed brighter, and the entire chamber shook with a force that nearly knocked the crew off their feet. The walls of the spire seemed to warp, bending and twisting as though they were being sucked into the void of the black hole itself. We need to get out of here. Rios shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Now! The crew turned and bolted toward the entrance, but the chamber continued to tremble as the energy from the black hole intensified. The spire was reacting to the vision, its walls crumbling, its surface disintegrating into streams of energy. The very fabric of space seemed to be unraveling around them. As they made their way back to the airlock, the vision of the black hole loomed in their minds, a reminder of the fragility of existence and the terrifying reality they now faced. They had ventured into the unknown, and what they had found was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The crew of the Elysium scrambled through the deteriorating corridors of the spire, their hearts racing as the chamber they had just left continued to collapse around them. The image of the black hole, its consuming force ever present in their minds, pushed them forward with a renewed sense of urgency. The spire, once a monument to alien knowledge, was now a crumbling death trap, as though the very structure was reacting to their presence with violent desperation. Move faster. Captain Rios commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. She led the way, her eyes scanning the fluctuating lights and tremors beneath her feet. The air was thick with energy, and every step felt like a battle against an invisible force that was pulling them toward oblivion. We're not going to make it. Lieutenant Kinley shouted, her breath shallow as she sprinted behind Rios. The whole thing's coming apart. We need to get back to the ship. I know, Rios replied, her voice firm despite the panic creeping into the crew's words. Just keep moving. The Elysium's not far, we can make it. The walls of the spire seemed to pulse and warp with each tremor, the once beautiful patterns now chaotic and unstable. The energy field that had surrounded them earlier was now an oppressive force, pushing against them as though the spire itself was trying to expel them. The crew could feel the immense weight of something closing in, the pull of the void drawing them into its grasp. Adrian Malik's voice crackled through the comms. Captain. We've got massive structural failure on our approach. The docking bay is destabilizing. If we don't get there in the next few minutes, the ship won't be able to hold. Rios cursed under her breath. Can you stabilize the bay? We need to be able to get back on board. We're trying, Captain, but it's not looking good. The energy pulses are too strong. It's distorting our systems. I don't know how long we can keep the airlock functional. They were running out of time. We're almost there. Lieutenant Kinley called out as the entrance to the docking bay came into view. But even as she spoke, the corridor before them twisted and buckled. A deafening crack echoed through the spire as a massive chunk of the structure tore free from the wall, sending a shockwave that knocked the crew off their feet. Rios's head slammed against the floor, and for a moment, the world went black. When she came to, she could hear the frantic voices of her crew, the chaos all around her. She struggled to her feet, vision swimming, and found Lieutenant Kinley crouched beside her, reaching out a hand. Captain, are you all right? Kinley's voice was tense with concern. I'm fine, Rios rasped, wiping blood from her brow. But we need to move. Now. The crew pressed on, stumbling over debris as the spire continued to shake apart. It felt as though the entire structure was collapsing into the void, its very being torn asunder by the unseen force of the black hole. They could hear the deep, resonating hum of the transmission growing louder and louder, like a warning. The rhythmic pulse of the structure was now dissonant, sharp, as if the spire itself was in agony. The docking bay doors loomed ahead, but before they could reach them, the floor beneath them cracked open, and a cascade of energy surged toward them from all directions. The crew was thrown to the ground, their suits flickering with interference as the energy waves scrambled their systems. "Get up!" Rios shouted, her voice full of authority despite the chaos. She reached for her crew, helping them to their feet. "The ship won't wait for us." With no time to lose, they pushed forward, their legs heavy from the exhaustion of the escape. The air was thick, and the atmosphere inside the spire had grown unstable. The temperature fluctuated wildly, from blistering heat to freezing cold in mere seconds, as though the structure was being torn between different realities. When they finally reached the docking bay, the door was half open, but the surrounding area was a war zone. Sparks flew from the damaged consoles, and the walls were visibly crumbling, part of the ceiling threatening to collapse entirely. "Adrian!" Rios called through the comms, her voice sharp. "We need the airlock open now." "We're trying, Captain, but there's a—" Malik's voice was cut off by a crackling burst of static. Then, after a long pause, his voice came back through, tinged with urgency. "I've got it. The airlock's functioning, but the external hull is failing. You've got minutes, maybe less." Rios didn't waste a second. She pushed her team toward the airlock, the massive pressure of the failing spire bearing down on them. They were so close now. So close to safety. But every step felt like it was taking them further into the abyss. The sound of the black hole's pull was deafening now, reverberating through the very fabric of the spire. It was alive, and it was hungry. "Hold on!" Rios shouted as the team dove into the airlock. The door slammed shut behind them with a bone-rattling thud, and the hissing of the pressure seals filled the air as they rushed toward the inner ship. Inside the Elysium, the crew scrambled to secure the doors, double-check the systems, and prepare for takeoff. The ship was shaking violently, as though the very fabric of space itself was being torn apart around them. "Initiate launch sequence," Rios barked. "Get us out of here, now!" Adrian Malik didn't hesitate. His hands flew across the control panel as he initiated the emergency launch. The thrusters roared to life, and the ship lurched into motion, pulling away from the crumbling spire. But even as they shot into the void, they could feel the immense force of the collapsing structure reaching out after them, pulling them back into the black hole's grasp. "Engage FTL drives," Rios ordered, her voice firm, commanding. The engines of the Elysium roared as the ship powered into faster-than-light speed, the stars blurring into streaks of light. But as they left the spire behind, Rios couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun to uncover the true nature of the threat they were facing. The black hole's pull still lingered in her mind, its presence like a shadow hanging over them, a reminder that their journey into the unknown had only scratched the surface of a much larger, far darker mystery. The Elysium shot through the void, the crew now safe, at least for the moment, but they knew that the universe had just revealed a terrifying glimpse of what lay beyond the stars. And whatever that was, it was coming for them.
The crew of the Elysium sat in tense silence as the ship streaked through the void, the hum of the engines the only sound in the dimly lit command center. Their escape from the collapsing spire had been just the beginning, and now, as they made their way back to the edge of the known universe, the gravity of what they had witnessed began to settle in. The black hole, the pulsing spire, the disturbing images of civilizations falling, everything they had encountered was still fresh in their minds, each moment playing over and over, leaving them with more questions than answers. Captain Rios stood at the helm, staring out at the infinite expanse of space. The stars stretched out before them, distant and cold, as though nothing in the universe could be further from the chaos they had just escaped. But in her mind, the image of the black hole's insatiable pull was still clear. The knowledge they had uncovered on the spire, the warnings of an inevitable cosmic destruction, weighed heavily on her. "We've made it out, but what now?" Lieutenant Kinley asked, her voice a mix of relief and unease as she looked at the rest of the crew. "What does all of this mean?" What are we supposed to do with the information we've gathered? Dr. Malik, who had been quietly analyzing the data they had retrieved from the spire, looked up from his console, his face grim. We've uncovered something, far beyond our understanding. The spire wasn't just a record of past civilizations, it was a warning. And from what I can gather, it's not just a relic of a lost age. That black hole, that force pulling everything into it, it's a constant cycle, an event that happens repeatedly throughout the universe. Civilizations rise, only to be consumed by it. This, whatever this is, it's inevitable. Rios clenched her fists. But how do we stop it? We saw the end of it. The fall of those civilizations. Are we doomed to the same fate? Malik shook his head. I don't know. But we have to learn more. We have to understand how to break this cycle. The spire's transmissions were clear about one thing: it's not just about destruction. There's knowledge here, knowledge that could help us stop the end. Rios turned her gaze back to the stars. We've always pushed beyond the edge of what's known, hoping to find answers. But this is something else entirely. We've ventured into the unknown, and what we've found is a force older and more powerful than anything we could have imagined. If this is happening across the universe, we're not just looking at the end of a civilization. We're looking at the death of existence itself. The crew was silent for a long moment, each person lost in their thoughts, processing the weight of what they had discovered. But Rios knew they couldn't afford to dwell on fear or uncertainty. They were humanity's best hope, the first to discover this cosmic cycle, and it was now their responsibility to prevent it from happening again. We can't give up, Rios said finally, her voice firm with resolve. We have to fight. We've seen what's out there, and now it's on us to find a way to stop it. We've already faced the unimaginable and come out alive. That has to mean something. We'll find a way to break this cycle before it's too late. Lieutenant Kinley stood beside her, determination in her eyes. But where do we even start? The spire, the black hole, the civilizations, it's all so overwhelming. What's our first step? We start by going back, Rios replied, her mind already formulating the next move. We go back to the spire. We study it more. We look for answers. There's got to be more to it than just the destruction. If this cycle is repeating, there's something in that spire that can tell us how to stop it. Malik nodded. I agree. We've barely scratched the surface of what that structure holds. If we're going to have any chance at understanding this threat, we need to go back, dig deeper. We can't do this from a distance. We have to go in. The rest of the crew murmured in agreement, their resolve hardening. They had faced the unknown before, but this was different. This wasn't just about exploration or discovery. This was about survival, humanity's survival. Rios turned to her crew, her voice steady and full of conviction. We're going back, but this time, we'll be prepared. We'll gather everything we need, every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge we can carry with us. The spire has shown us the destruction that awaits, but it has also shown us the way forward. We have to be the ones to break the cycle. If we don't, the universe will continue its relentless march toward oblivion. Kinley glanced at her colleagues, her expression filled with determination. We're not just explorers anymore, are we? We're the last line of defense. Rios gave a small, resolute smile. Yes. And we'll do everything in our power to stop it. For humanity. For the future. As the crew prepared for their return to the spire, there was no longer any fear in their hearts. Instead, there was a burning desire to uncover the secrets hidden within that ancient structure. They had seen the cosmic destruction that awaited them, but they also saw the hope, the possibility of breaking the cycle. They weren't just witnesses to the end of the universe. They were the ones who could change it. The Elysium powered up once again, its engines roaring to life as it veered back toward the unknown. The journey ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than they had ever been. But the crew was united in their mission. They had ventured beyond the edge of the known universe, and now they would go further, deeper, into the heart of the mystery, to find the answers they so desperately needed. The universe was waiting, and humanity's bold journey had only just begun.